Good morning and welcome to Choose Views. We have with us today a man who has gone from one end of the spectrum to the other and found home doing the things that so many of us want to do, which is to write and to talk and to share his observations. And that would be author Jason Van Tatenhove with us this morning on Choose Views. You guys may recognize Jason's name because we don't have the visual of Jason to put on the screen because we're on radio, but you may recognize his name. You're certainly going to recognize what he has to say. He was once a former spokesperson for the far-right paramilitary group, the Oath Keepers, and that's a name that may resonate with a lot of folks. But Jason is the kind of person, from all that I've read about him, that said, hey, wait a minute. And that's one of the most powerful things we as human beings can do is go, hey, wait a minute. And Jason, I want to welcome you to Choose Views, and thank you for taking some time to be with us this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
So, I'll dive into the deep end of the pool, and you can throw me a life preserver if I start to drown. But tell us a little bit about yourself, your most recent journey, and some of the things that you're working on. And I'm going to ask you the why questions, but I'm not going to ask you any gotcha questions. I don't do that. But tell us a little bit about what's been happening in your world these last 3 to 5 years.
Man, it's been just a tsunami that I could have never imagined hitting me. My time with the Oath Keepers was really just a small sliver of my life experience. It was just about a year and a half. And it was a while ago. It's going on 8 years ago now. But since then, and I kind of, if you read the book, that I kind of went into the whole thing with the notion of wanting to write my own Hells Angels. Hunter S. Thompson's breakout novel was The Hells Angels. And I kind of, when I saw Bundy Ranch happening, I wanted to go and try to do that for myself. I had been reading entirely too much Hunter S. Thompson and was in a place where I was kind of vulnerable, to be honest with you. Looking back at it in 2020 now, I can certainly see where I was in a bit of a vulnerable place. And I'm good at getting myself into trouble. I'm really good at getting embedded, say, with the president and founder of the Oath Keepers. I was able to make some calls over a weekend and get embedded to go as a independent journalist down to Bundy Ranch with the Stuart Rhodes. And I did that. And I was working for a small little media outlet called Revolution Radio at the time. Got them to pay the expenses of the way down and did live broadcasts there. But I started getting invited back to future armed standoffs and started getting a very insider view of how this group functioned, kind of fly on the wall. And then was asked to take on the national media director position, and I thought, well, this is unprecedented access, and had intentions of writing the book, and still that got lost a little bit along the way. I finally wrote it. It took me about 5 years, but since then I really, at first I wanted to stick my head in the sand and just forget it, because I knew that I would always be that Oath Keepers guy, right? Like, I'd never be known for my writing. I'd never, it didn't matter how good of storytelling I might do. I was always going to be that Oath Keepers guy. But it wasn't until I actually got like a literary agent, like a really good literary agent, who told me, look, Jason, people have to know what you're doing behind the scenes, because I was very active after I left with, working with some of the top shelf journalists that I had created some rapport with while I was a national media director, trying to warn kind of behind the scenes in helping to connect the dots for different journalists, always off the record, always, I don't want my name associated with this at all. But my agent was like, look, you got to start letting some of these things be attributed to you. So I let one, it was literally like a paragraph of a Washington Post story be attributed to me. And man, this tsunami that hit immediately of media attention just has not relented to this day. But in the end, it's been a good thing, because I think it's really positioned me to kind of undo some of the damage I did while working for the Oath Keepers, because I certainly felt a certain amount of responsibility watching the events unfold on January 6th with my daughters and my wife, who passed away last year. We were all sitting on the couch watching this, and it was like a physical gut punch to watch what was transpiring and realizing that, in some small way, my words and my storytelling that I did then led to that, because, it was a part of the mix. So, since then I've been on, I don't know how many documentaries. I'm in a new documentary coming out. It's premiering in New York City on October 26th, I want to say. It's a Goldberg film. White Fear is the name of it. Hillary Clinton's in it. There's a whole bunch of really big names. That should be great. But, I'm on documentaries all the time. I do spots like this all the time. I'm able to work with organizations like with Mary McCord over at Georgetown Law's Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection. I spent a year doing regional convenings with them, where I would go and tell my story and talk about the dangers that domestic extremism presents. A different, there was just a great mix of people that would show up to those. This year I've been working with the National Holocaust Museum, Memorial Museum, doing speaking engagements all over the country. It just has brought me to where I am now. And, all in all, with how crazy my life journey has been, I really like where I am right now, because I feel like I'm doing some work that actually makes a difference, because my story, I think, can resonate with a certain segment of the population that may be on the edge, that maybe has started going down that extremist route. Because let's face it, there's a whole bunch of people in America right now that have gotten spun up, and it's easy to do. I come from a very leftist family. Mm-hmm. I was kind of raised by the remnants of the abstract expressionists and the beat writers of New York City of the 50s and 60s. So, where do you go to rebel from that? You go find a militia.
That's so funny that you put it that way. I laugh with you, because I could tell you kind of had a smile, you kind of a wry smile on your face when you said that. But listen, man, one of the things that a lot of people have to get more credit for, but have to be given the space forward, is to seeing a way forward, is to seeing things from their experience. I like what you said. I like the place that I'm in right now. But you wouldn't be in that place if you hadn't had these discoveries, which were part of the experience of the work that you did. And and being, handling media operations, you wouldn't, if you had not had that experience, you wouldn't be where you are today, which is in a happier place. And
not at all.
I applaud people. All of us have to be able to stop sometimes and look and say, okay, how did I get here? What happened? And what can I do to use that to make things better for other people? And you're clearly, you're doing that. Your Perils of Extremism is a great testament to that, because you're talking about that. You're explaining to people why this is something you've got to be mindful and aware of every day. So I applaud you in that space, but tell us what drove you to write this specific bit of work.
Sure. The way I was raised, as I said, I was kind of raised by these crazy hippie artist types. And, racism was never a part of things. It was just never part of the vernacular of our family experience. I have a cousin and an aunt who married into the family that were Jewish. My cousin went to Hebrew school. We used to do blended holidays where, they'd light the menorah and we'd do our suburban white Christmas. So that's the world I came from, and racism wasn't a part of that. And, I could get behind, I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado for the most part after we moved out of it. I originally started outside the New York City area in North Jersey. When I was 10, 12, we moved out to the trophy wife of American suburbia, which is Fort Collins, Colorado. And, so a bit of a culture shock. We have this programmer, all these rock star computer programmers for Hewlett Packard at 2 campuses right there. So it was a completely different culture. And, CSU, Colorado State University, is right there in town. And they have a lot of, independent documentary films that come through. And I've been a documentary film junkie my entire life. And I'd watch these films come through about Waco and Ruby Ridge and the federal government, and we're largely products of the media we consume. So, I think all of American history gives Americans a moment to pause and not trust our government. I think there's a lot of reasons we need to hold our government to account. Obviously my views have tempered as to how to do that. I think that writing and engaging in nonviolent ways is a much better approach than armed standoffs these days. But that's what kind of led me down there was I had a pretty deep-seated distrust of the government, and I could get behind that. But once I started seeing racism creep in, and we were right up on the Canadian border, living in a small town called Eureka, Montana, which is right in the northwest corner of Montana, right near the Idaho border. Yeah. Kind of a who's who of the crazy extremist movement, and more and more I would notice racism creeping in. I think to a large part, Stuart kind of catered the words he used towards me. I remember him saying, Jason, I would love to do an armed standoff for a gay couple that are protecting their pot farm from the federal government, which I think in hindsight was definitely cherry picking for me. But, it couldn't be denied when I walked into a conversation at the local grocery store where, one of the guys I had met the very first night I had gone down to Bundy Ranch with Stuart. He was one of the first people I met, introduced as one of the core members of the organization. I walked into a conversation where he was actively talking about how the Holocaust hadn't happened with two other associates of his. And my jaw just dropped. I couldn't believe that, there was someone in public, in a public space, talking about how the Holocaust had never happened. And that for me really, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And really my line in the sand I couldn't cross. So I didn't even get the groceries I had gone to get for dinner. I went home and called a family meeting and told my girls, and money was definitely a part of it. I mean, I was much better paid as a writer and media guy, for the militia than I've ever been as a legitimate journalist. I've gone back to legitimate journalism. I write for the local newspaper in a small mountain town I live in, and they're owned by Out, and we're in the same network as the Denver Post and Chicago Tribune, and one of the biggest networks in the country. So my stuff gets replicated out, and I've never been better paid. There used to be holiday seasons where I would have to choose between medication for my wife, who was, chronically ill the whole time I was with her, the 30 years we were together, and presents for my daughters, and when I was working for the Oath Keepers, I didn't have to worry about that. Yeah. So, that's a part of the story as well, is, that
is that a part of the draw? Is that a part of the draw for others and beyond? They may have their social political beliefs on certain things that are part of the Oath Keepers' creed, but are they in an economic situation where they're tempted by or drawn to the organization because of the resources that are available to them? To some degree. I mean, unfortunately, there was a lot of promises made by Stuart to a lot of people when there were call-outs and stuff that were never fulfilled. People weren't paid out when they're supposed to. I mean, I was one of the few people that got paid every time because what I was doing was important to, the generation of membership dues and whatnot. So, I had an experience that was different than a lot of the others that were involved. And, a lot of people became disenfranchised because of that and wound up walking away from things. But desperation certainly is a part of that recipe. When people, and more than anything, it's when people systematically feel that they aren't listened to, almost generationally, in some of these rural areas. When you have a charismatic leader who comes through and offers you a hand, and you feel like you're drowning,
whether that's economically or just hope in the future for your children. A lot of these places, I've been to places in Kentucky where there are Suboxone wrappers literally floating through on the wind. They're everywhere. And talking to parents, they talk about how, the coal mines have all shut down. There's no other hope for their children other than that they move to Ohio and get a job at a Burger King. I mean, that's how dysfunctional some of the rural areas are due to, the circumstances, the economic circumstances that have happened.
A feeling of despair takes over, and they're going to outreach hand that's speaking to their deficiency, not character-wise or anything of that nature.
To them, yeah. I mean, even just speaking directly to them, that can help to short circuit some of that critical thinking centers in our mind that normally say, well, maybe I shouldn't get involved with something like this. Having that charismatic leader reaching a hand out and saying, hey, I have a community for you. I have something for you to plug into. I have not only that, but we have a mission for you. And this is why it resounded a lot with a lot of the veterans was, we certainly haven't treated our veterans very well.
Yeah. So it gave them a place to be part of, because we hear this so many times about men and women that have gone back for additional tours just in Afghanistan, because it gives them a sense of purpose, a part of something, a mission. That's part of who we are as human beings, to feel a part of something. Yeah. We want to be a part of something, even if we're off. If we go off on our own and just go out to celebrate nature, guess what? People think that person wants to be alone, but they want to be a part of something, and that thing is nature. So we all want to be connected to something. And so I get where and how folks, I think about it in terms of gangs in different cities. And so many times people denigrate gangs. And now I'll speak to this as an African-American male, that, gangs are awful and this, that, and the other about gangs. Well, many times becoming a member of a gang, so to speak, or an urban gang is because they want to be a part of something. They are not bad people. They weren't, born bad and all these other things that people get labeled with, but they didn't see any other option, and they needed to be that charismatic leader. Wasn't necessarily Stewart Rhodes or Jim Jones or whomever else. It was a dude that was on the street down the block that had something to say to this young kid whose father may have died or his mother may have left, whatever the case may be. They're now a part of something. So psychologically, from that standpoint and how our brain works, I get that. And it sounds like that many of the folks that have become part of the Oath Keepers, and I'm not excusing it, I'm just saying, coming from a place of what you said, of understanding and listening.
Yeah, no, community is such a huge thing for us. I mean, we're supposed to have these communities, and we've to a large degree lost that communal connection. We're all in our iPhones, we're all in our social media echo chambers, and we've certainly lost something with community. And I think that's part of the equation as well that's led us to where we are. And that coupled with storytelling, the media that we consume, we've kind of found a sense of community in whether it's, talk radio, your social media groups that you're a part of. People have found kind of a surrogate to community in this. And unfortunately, a lot of these extremist groups have keyed in on this. And they've known this since the beginning. But going back to I can relate it to skinheads coming to town when I was a teenager, of course, being the white misfit kid with tattoos with the last name of Van Tatenhove, they would target me. And, I'd see them also target other kids. And, it wasn't the kid that was a captain of the soccer team. It was a kid that looked like he didn't have a family life, that if he had a family life, it seemed like it might be somewhat nightmarish. They looked for the people that seemed like they were missing part of that community, and they'd come in and say, hey, we have a community for you. We have a family for you. You got to go, jump somebody of color to be part of it, but we've got this community for you, and that's such a powerful thing that it overrides a lot of people that maybe wouldn't have thought to do something like that previously. They're now open to it.
On the backside of that is praise for having done it, and that praise gives a person a sense of belonging, which then that's a powerful humanistic drug, and I don't mean that in a negative way. So I appreciate you illuminating that a little bit. Jason, we're going to wrap up, brother. I know you're busy, and like I said to you before we started the segment, the next time you're in Chicago, we definitely have to get together, and I'd love to have you come into the studio. But kudos to you, man, for the work that you've done and the progress that you've made, and keep on being the great dad you are to your 3 daughters and your granddaughter. And I know that you are doing a lot of this work for their future, which so many people are taking on right now, and I applaud you for that. As we wrap up, we've had the opportunity to be with Jason Van Tatenhove. I like to get it right, so that's why we wanted to get Van Tatenhove.
Don't worry. Literally everyone in the world has mispronounced my name, whether it's Anderson Cooper or the congressional.
I get it too, man. I mean, my last name is Chew, Chew. Something we all do every day is choose something in part, but I get shoe, I get SHO, I mean, all kinds of things. So I'm with you on that and understanding. But I appreciate you being with us today, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I know that it's not easy, but that's where the good stuff is when we put in the hard work, because as Vice President Harris has been saying, hard work is good work. So,
man. Yeah. And I tell you what, before we wrap up, I just want to say we really are at a crossroads right now. I mean, we right now in the next few weeks, we'll see whether or not we still have a functioning democracy, and everyone just needs to get out and vote. I just can't stress that enough. And we need to support Vice President Harris. That's Absolutely. The only way forward.
Jason, thank you, man. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for that clarity in your final comments. That's important for people to hear, coming from someone that has your experience. And stay safe out there. We got you here in Chicago, and we appreciate you being on Choose Views on WCPT.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
You too. Bye now.